James Gunn has done it again, folks. He does not miss when it comes to these Guardians movies. They're so incredible. So that's what we're going to talk about today, you guys, is talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. First off, welcome to Sector for Nerds. I'm Ryan Brower. If this is your first time here, hi, hello, welcome to Sector for Nerds. This is a place where I create content mostly about Star Wars, but I'm also a big MCU guy. So anything that's like MCU related when it comes to the movie and television side of things, I like to cover here on this channel. I'm also a massive Star Wars fan, you guys, so I do like a lot of reaction videos, a lot of discussions similar to the Marvel stuff. I'm currently playing through Star Wars Jedi Survivor, which is a phenomenal game, you guys. It definitely have my frustrations with some of the gameplay aspects to it, but overall I'm having fun with it, and I highly recommend that you guys check that content out if you haven't yet. And I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of this year, you guys, so if you haven't subscribed, I would please consider doing so. I want to start doing like live streams, you guys, and especially like watch party live stream type stuff. So the first thing that we're going to do once we reach 1,000 subscribers, or one of the first big live streams that we're going to have, is a watch through of an entire Star Wars trilogy, whether it be the prequels, originals, sequels. So I highly recommend you guys subscribe. It's free and it really helps support me as a content creator. Thank you guys. And if you're looking for more content from me, be sure to head over to Top 10 Character Moments and subscribe there as well. It's a place where I create top 10 videos on all my favorite characters and breaking down like my favorite moments from them. I'll definitely be doing some on some of the Guardians characters pretty soon, so make sure you guys are staying tuned for all that. Okay guys, I think I've gotten all the pleasantries aside and promoted everything that I wanted to promote, so with that being said, I want to talk about Guardians 3, you guys. Okay. This movie, I don't even know where to start. It was amazing. It was beautiful. Emotions were at an all-time high for me. The first two Guardians movies are in like my top 5 favorite MCU movies of all time, and I think this third one, you guys, has to go right up there as well. Like, if you ask me like which Guardians is your favorite, like, it's really hard for me to decide. Like, I feel like originally I would have said the first Guardians movie. The first Guardians movie I absolutely love. Like, that's a movie, you guys, that whenever I would, like, especially when the movie came out and I had access to it, whenever I'd have like a sick day at school, or, you know, whatever was going on, or getting my wisdom teeth pulled, or whatever I had going on in my life that I would just be stuck at home, like, that first Guardians movie was always a go-to movie that I would watch. I love the story. I love the characters. It was such a different movie in the MCU. I didn't know much regarding Marvel characters when I started with the MCU. Like, obviously I knew who like Iron Man and Hulk, like Captain America, all the main Avengers, like I knew who they were, but I didn't know much about them, you know what I'm saying? Because I was never really like a comic reader or anything. And then I had no idea who on earth the Guardians of the Galaxy were. I had no idea. And now, like, some of those guys are like my favorite characters in the MCU. And I love the second movie as well. Like, the second Guardians movie, I feel like the second one doesn't get enough praise. I know at the time the biggest complaint was, it had nothing to do with the Infinity plot, which at the time was definitely a criticism of mine. But like, looking back on it now, I'm actually kind of glad that it didn't have anything to do with it, especially seeing like where the Infinity story went. And what I mean by that is like that story got so dark that it's like, it's almost nice to have like a change of pace in a movie that like doesn't have anything to do with like that dark plot. The first two Guardians movies, you really don't have to see much, you know what I'm saying? Like in terms of MCU stuff, because nothing in the like main MCU bubble really affected the Guardians universe. And then Avengers Infinity War happened and Endgame happened. And that sort of changes the landscape for the Guardians, right? Especially going into the third movie, which we're going to get into, you guys. It's funny because James Gunn, he did a discussion, I think, with comicbook.com where they asked him like, hey, did you have like a say in what happened with like the Guardians or whatever in the Avengers movies? And it was funny because I think he had said that originally the plan was going to be for Gamora to die at the end of Guardians 2 instead of Yondu, which he said like certain people talked him out of, which in hindsight, I also agree that was a much better decision to do Yondu than Gamora, even though like I still want Yondu back, you guys. I love Yondu. And when he showed up in the, I should probably specify, there will be spoilers. So if it hasn't been made clear yet, right? But there is one point in Guardians 3 where Yondu shows up, but it's not even for Peter, it's for Kraglin. And it's the moment when he finally masters the arrow. It's like, don't use your head, use your heart. And it's like, that's the moment where he finally figures it out and he starts using it. And like in the theater, like that was one of the moments where I just was like, yes, like got really excited because I've been waiting for Kraglin to perfect this thing. Like we see him struggle with it at the end of Guardians 2, the holiday special, he still doesn't have the hang of it. So here he finally masters it. But yeah, James Gunn had talked about, like, you know, when he had spoken with the Russo brothers and Kevin Feige about what they were planning for Gamora in Infinity War, it seemed like he was cool with it, which I think is cool. Like, that was one of the big questions I always had about Gamora. I wish that James Gunn had a say in what the Guardians were going to be doing in those Marvel movies. Or if I was James Gunn and I didn't know what was going to happen to Gamora in Infinity War, I would have went to them and been like, hey, what the fuck? Like, that's one of my characters. Like, that's, like, y'all didn't let me have a say on that. So the fact that it seems like they did, or like maybe he wouldn't have necessarily had a say, right? Like the Russo brothers probably went like, hey, this is what we're going to be doing. Because like, even if James Gunn was like, well, no, I don't want to do this, then they probably still went, all right, well, we're doing it anyway, so screw you. But the fact that James Gunn was cool with it, like, that's awesome. What I love so much about this movie is that everybody had their moments to shine. But probably the biggest one to shine of them all in this movie was Rocket. There were, I would want to say, a good 20-25 minutes of this movie were dedicated to Rocket's backstory. And that was definitely a big emotional point of this movie for me, was his story and him having these friends, but then realizing that none of them are going to make it to this, you know, safe haven that they've been claiming that they're going to go to. And the main villain for this movie, and I can't remember his name, but when the bad guy kills one of Rocket's friends, and like, I was just like, no, and then they all end up dying. And like, because a lot of the movie, we don't actually see Rocket in the moment. It's all backstory stuff because Rocket is like unconscious. The person that created him, right? Like he put the thing in his chest where it's like, if you try to save him using med packs and stuff, he'll die, which is really fucked up. But once Rocket finally does come back, I love that Rocket chooses to fight. Because it's very curious, you guys. I feel like, especially in some of the other movies that Rocket has been a part of, not that Rocket has necessarily run from the fight, but it was interesting to me that like one of the only Avengers that or one of the only like superheroes that we don't see take on Thanos, even for like a split second in like Infinity War or Endgame, is Rocket. So I found that very curious. And then like here, when he says like, I'm done running, it makes it feel like, no, I'm done being a coward. I'm done running from the fight. I'm gonna freaking kick this dude's ass. And like at first Rocket's the one who's getting his butt kicked, but then like they have this really cool moment where like all the Guardians come in, everybody gets a piece of this motherfucker, and it was great. I'm like sitting there like, let's go, beat the fucking shit out of this guy. Because I feel like there's not enough times in the MCU where the good guys really get their comeuppance on the bad guy. Like, yeah, they defeat the bad guy in the end, but like they don't get to lay in like some good shots on him or anything, right? All the time. But it's like, in here, it was like everyone's just like getting their stuff in, beating the crap out of him. I'm like, yes, because it's like this dude deserves it, right? It's like we're sitting there like, okay, this dude is a fucking like creep. He's a killer. He's a murderer. It's like fucking beat the fucking shit out of this guy. Man, I loved it. I was like, and then the action scene that came before that, where like it was all using one camera. I love action scenes like that where they just take one camera and they follow everybody around. I think there were like a couple points where they could have hit a couple camera shots, which I have experience in television production. So like I have like a slight idea of where they could have hid some stuff, but whether or not they did, I can't say for sure. But everybody, you guys, got their moments to shine in this episode, not just Rocket. We see Star-Lord, who goes through an incredible arc in this movie where we start out with him drunk. Obviously, towards the beginning, there were some references, right? Like Nebula tells Mantis, why don't you talk to him? He's your brother. So, like, obviously, if you haven't seen the Guardians holiday special, there were probably some people going like, wait, what? When did this happen? I'm so glad that they played off of that, you guys, because that was going to be one of my worries going into the film. It's like, okay, if you're going to do this holiday special and drop this big bombshell, like, you have to have it play into the movie a little bit. And it did, because, like, Star-Lord and Mantis had, like, some really good conversations with each other, even getting Drax to say some stuff for him, which was very funny. And obviously, Drax has been the comedic warrior of this entire franchise. But by the end of the movie, like, Star-Lord figures out, like, hey, I'm gonna, go to Earth and see my grandfather, which was a really nice moment. I never thought that I would ever see him do that. Just like, it seemed like he wanted to distance himself from Earth, from his family. Mantis obviously talks about this as well. Quill basically saying, look, I have all the family I need here. I have you. I have the Guardians. Like, I don't need them. Mantis kind of figuring out her own path in this movie. She continues to talk about how, like, nobody listens to her and all this stuff, but at the end, she says, when they all decide to distance themselves and go their separate ways, Peter goes to Earth, which this whole scene, you guys, like, when they talked about separating, I was fucking tearing up the whole time, because I'm like, this is the end. Even if we get some of them back, we're not going to have all of them together like this anymore. I'm pretty sure Dave Bautista, I feel like, has said on multiple occasions at this point, after Guardians 3, I'm done. That's it. I don't know, maybe they can bring him back if they don't do action scenes with him and just have him in the costume or something, I don't know. But Mantis talks about how, look, I've done everything that I've done in my life, it's been for someone else, whether it was ego, whether it was the Guardians. I need to go out and do things for me and sort of find my place. Very much like a story arc that's going on in Jedi Survivor with Marin, where she goes out and figures out who she is and stuff. Like, I love that. I love the idea of Mantis going out and just doing her business, do what she's got to do. And then, eventually maybe that gets to a point where it reunites her with the Guardians, or at least reunites her with Peter. Nebula in this movie, it very much felt like, you guys, we'll kind of combine Nebula and Gamora here, because it's very interesting in the fact that it almost feels like the two of them swapped roles, in the sense that Gamora was like the more compassionate one at the start and was, with the Guardians and, enjoyed being on the team. And then you have Nebula, who's the more like ruthless one, you know what I'm saying? And, take no prisoners kind of attitude, right? But it feels like those roles have swapped now, where Nebula's the more compassionate one, even though she's still very sour about a lot of things, and we can get to that. But Gamora's more the one who's like, I'm gonna freaking point a gun at your head and you're gonna let us through, or I kill every single one of you. And it's like, holy shit. Gamora in the movie continuing to say, like, I'm whoever this person is that you think I am, it's not me. But I did like at the end of the movie, like when they're about to go their separate ways, it almost felt like that the Gamora of old came back for a second, almost as like a way to like, okay, we're splitting this relationship off completely. But that line where she says, like, I bet we were fun. And it's like, because she kind of sees him throughout this movie, right, doing all this stuff for his friends, and Gamora starts to understand that level of compassion that he has for his friends and what he's willing to do to save them. And it almost felt like, okay, like, I'll give you something, but we got to go our separate ways, And I think, I felt like that gave me a little bit of closure too, just in the sense that I loved OG Gamora. You know what I'm saying? Like, she fit in with those Guardians so well. I love that OG crew. And that was one of my concerns going into Guardians 3. How was that going to impact things? And to be honest, I thought they played it as good of a job as they could have done. Where in the end, like, I felt satisfied with the conclusion of that character and like where they take her with the Ravagers and all that stuff. Speaking of the Ravagers, when I saw Sylvester Stallone's name like appear in the opening credits and stuff, I'm like, oh, he's coming back for this movie, because I had no idea. I didn't remember that being a thing. Groot had some moments to shine in this movie, like when he pulls out like the 8 different blasters or whatever and starts shooting everybody. Like, that was crazy. Oh yeah, and then the other Groot moment that made me cry is at the end when he said, he no longer said, I am Groot. He said, I love you guys. Cosmo and Kraglin were probably the two that had like the least amount of screen time in this movie, but Cosmo definitely had some moments to shine, save it, like using her telekinesis to save everybody. and then Kraglin and her having some bickering back and forth, right? Like, oh, don't call me a bad dog, take it back, take it back. And by the end he does, and like that was cool. And I guess the other character that I want to really touch on is Adam Warlock, which was teased at the end of Guardians 2 and something that I was like, ooh, I'm excited for this. And like, obviously I didn't know much about Adam Warlock, but I heard that he was such a big deal, and I was like, all right, I'm curious to see what this guy brings to the table. And the fact that in the end, right, like when they save him and it's like, well, wait, why did you save me after like I've gone after you guys this entire movie? I've been beating the shit out of you. I'm part of the reason why Rocket's in the state that he's in. Like, why are you guys doing this? And then Drax, like, everyone deserves a second chance. So for Adam Warlock to now kind of become a part of what looks like to be like a new Guardians faction, and I'm very excited for that, you guys, because at the end of the movie when they're all splitting up and they're like, yeah, Rocket, you're the leader now. I'm going off to do my thing. Like, Mantis is going off to do her thing. Nebula is going to stay on Nowhere, I think with Drax as well, to help turn it into like a safe haven for people, for like, these children to be able to grow up in and have the life that Nebula couldn't. And Nebula's like, for the first time today, Drax, I discovered who you were. You're not a destroyer. You're not meant to be a destroyer. You're meant to be a dad. When all the children are panicking and crying in the cages or whatever, I was sitting there like, I wonder if Drax is going to do something, because he was a father, right? And then like for him to go and do that, do the noises and make them laugh and stuff, I'm like, man, that's such a cool moment for Drax. Like, I'm gonna be doing a video, you guys, for top 10 character moments on my favorite Drax moments. I'm like, that one's gotta be up there for me. Like, that was such a, like, him moment. Like, that moment was meant for him. Like, you saw how Nebula was with them. You saw how Mantis was with them. So for Drax to be able to do that, and then, you guys, the icing on the cake for Drax's character to, like, if we never see Drax again, like, what a more perfect ending for him to go out dancing. The thing that throughout this entire trilogy has like sworn himself away from, that he does not do. He's not a dancer. And I'm sitting there like, at the end, they're gonna make him dance, aren't they? They're gonna do it. And then he does, and I just started laughing and crying, and I'm just like, this movie! Oh, I love it so much. Real quickly, to touch on that opening intro from the movie as well, like it was all the Guardians characters, absolutely brilliant. The Guardians as we know it are pretty much done. Now, something interesting that I want to touch on is the end credits scenes of that movie. So we get the first one with the new Guardians team, and that's obviously something that I think is going to play a factor in like future movies to come. And maybe that'll result in like some of the Guardians being able to reunite with each other. But then very curiously, they have another end credits scene with Peter and his grandfather. Really a nothing scene, to be honest. Like just in the sense that like nothing of like much importance happened. But very curiously, like, at the end of the movies, you guys, it'll say like the Guardians of the Galaxy will return, or, whatever else. Captain America will return, Thanos will return, etc. Very curiously, you guys, it just said at the end, Peter Quill will return. Not any of the other characters, which is very interesting. So does this then mean that Star-Lord, Peter, is going to have a big impact in whatever goes on with the Kang dynasty? Like, is he going to play a part in that fight? Especially now that he's on Earth as well. And I don't know if he plans on staying there for a while or what his plan is. But if Kang is coming to Earth, or whatever they're going to do with Kang and his army, is Star-Lord going to become a part of that fight? I could see it happening. And then maybe that's what results in like, all right, we need an army to take down Kang. It's like, all right, I know some people that can help. And then we insert the new Guardians. You know what I'm saying? I will say this much, you guys. I feel like the MCU desperately needed this movie, and I hope that financially it does well, because a lot of the newer MCU movies have not been doing well financially, regardless of what they might say. But to me, I thought this was a fantastic movie, and it's not that like all the other Marvel movies that they've done lately have been bad, but it's like, they're either like okay or they're decent, but there's nothing that's been like really outstanding to me, you guys, especially since Endgame. Like like Thor Love and Thunder I thought was good. I think my opinions on that movie have like changed a little bit since I saw it. Like at the time I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a great movie. So I don't know if I'm gonna go that far anymore to say that much, but I still think it was a good movie, contrary to the fact that like everyone else seems to hate it, but I thought it was a decent enough movie. The Ant-Man 3 I thought was all right. I don't think that was anything spectacular. Even though my brother really loved that movie. So, you know, everybody's entitled to their opinions to like what they like and what they don't like. But this movie, you guys, this is what I needed, from the MCU. And it's really sad that this trilogy, it's done now. James Gunn is done with the Guardians. The OG group is most likely done. It's really sad, but I have to say that to all the DC fans out there, you guys, if James Gunn continues the level of storytelling that he has done with the Guardians, and that translates over to what he's going to be doing in DC, like I know he's got that, you know, obviously he's the head of creative there, right? But he's also going to be like heavily involved in that first Superman movie. So if he continues this level of storytelling, you guys, that he has in the Guardians, you guys are in for an amazing ride. And I say you guys, I'm going to be a part of the ride too, because I cannot wait to see what James Gunn does with the DC universe. DC has desperately needed a revamp for a long time. A lot of their storytelling has been inconsistent and a lot of changes have been made over the years. But they need something different now. And I hope what James Gunn brings to the table is something truly spectacular that we've never seen from DC before. A couple days ago, I wrote a post after I got done watching the Guardians movies, and I just want to reiterate it here. To everybody who worked on these 3 Guardians movies, geez, I'm starting to get a little emotional about it. Thank you guys so much. These 3 movies have made me feel a certain way, like the stories, the characters, everything about them, the music as well, which James Gunn is a fucking master at picking out music for all these movies. The opening intro to Peacemaker is one of the greatest intros I've ever freaking seen, and part of it is the song choice, but obviously, you know, everyone that did the dance and stuff with it also plays a part in it. But I'll listen to that song all the time and just jam out to it. But these stories, like I'm trying to say, you guys, these stories, these characters, they mean everything to me. And it made me feel, it's funny because James Gunn said that on May 4th, I didn't want to copy what Star Wars did, but I wanted to make people feel the way that I felt when I was, you know, a little kid watching Star Wars. And as someone who feels a certain way watching Star Wars, watching these Guardians movies, it does make me feel like that kid watching Star Wars. It took me into a universe that I was able to just fully commit myself to and be entranced by and to be taken in, especially because it's like the world can be a shitty place, right? And it's like, I go to see a movie, I go to see a story because I want to escape all of the bullshit that goes on in life. Like, I know it, y'all know it, everybody knows it, right? And not to harp too much on storytelling nowadays, you guys, because everyone has their own opinions, but I feel like nowadays, the art of good storytelling and good character development, I feel like has been lost a lot. And I'm not going to go into like every single thing that I feel like has been completely scrutinized by Hollywood or by movie industries, whatever. I'm not going to, that's not the time for this. But to be able to still have stories like this where I can be taken to a universe and not have to worry about whether it's political bullshit or other bullshit that affects you in your everyday life that really pisses you off. To be able to go into a universe and to be invested, and it's hard for me to put into words, you guys, but it's like when you tell good stories, like this is the stuff that I live for. I reiterate this point all the time, but just tell good stories and people will commit themselves to it. And they will invest their time and money into it. That is the foundation for how you make money. So to everyone who worked on these movies, Thank you guys so much. I said it in my post, but these stories, these moments, these characters will forever live in my mind and in my heart. And I cannot wait until they put this movie on Disney Plus, and then I'm just gonna binge watch all three Guardians movies, just back to back to back. I'm gonna miss this. I'm gonna miss this universe. I'm gonna miss these characters. But I think like the cool thing about it, right, you guys, it's like we have the opportunity to go back and watch through them all over again, right? And it's funny because I feel like the older I get, and it's like I'm only in my freaking early 20s, but it's like the older I get, the more emotional I get about the things that I loved, especially growing up. And I feel like I have grown up with these Guardians movies. Like when the first Guardians movie came out, I want to say, I think I was at like the start of high school. And now I'm a fucking grown ass adult who has a job and has to pay bills. And these stories will forever stick with me. I cannot wait to see what James Gunn does with the DC universe. And I really do hope that Marvel can get back on track a little bit with their stories. And I know they've got the stuff going on with Jonathan Majors right now, which apparently is not looking good for them. Which also, for me as a fan, really sucks because one of the things that I have enjoyed about the MCU is Jonathan Majors' portrayal of Kang the Conqueror. So if we don't have that anymore, that's really gonna sour my interest in the MCU. Now, listen, whatever goes on with Jonathan Majors and the American court of law or whatever happens, right? Like they decide his fate, like whether he's guilty, whether he's not, like that's up to them. I'm just speaking from the perspective of a fan who is a fan, like who loves the portrayal of a certain character by this specific actor. So if I don't have that anymore, whether it be for better or worse, I'm gonna be a little bit down on that. You know what I'm saying? The thing is, you guys, like whenever I talk negatively about something, whether it be Star Wars or Marvel or anything that I talk about, it's never coming from a place of I want them to fail. It's very much the opposite. I criticize things and I talk about certain things that I don't like because I want them to do better. I want these companies and these movies to succeed because I want to continue to have good storytelling. So in the moments when I don't have that, it disappoints me because it makes me feel like, has the art of that been lost? And I understand that good storytelling is subjective. It's something that everyone has their own different take on what good storytelling is. And I feel like for me, like you look at this Guardians trilogy and I think like what James Gunn did with those characters, how he progressed them all throughout all the different movies, how he brought so much emotion to not only just the characters, but to be able to bring emotion to the fans watching them. Like there are a lot of people that love the Guardians movies. And again, to reiterate, like no one knew who those guys were. Like, let's be honest, you guys. Like obviously there are comic readers who will know, like diehard Marvel fans that will know who those guys are. But let's be honest, the majority of the people that were watching those Guardians movies, that were fans of those Guardians movies, had no idea who on earth any of those guys were. And now they're household names, and you see, you know, on Halloween, you'll see children dressing up as Rocket or Groot or Star-Lord or any of them because people have fallen in love with those characters. It's incredible. And I think we've been talking here long enough, you guys. I'm just trying to think if I have anything else to say, but thank you to everyone in the Guardians movie, like everyone that worked on the Guardians movies, who worked on those movies. They were absolutely fantastic. I love them all. Like, apart from Endgame and Infinity War, like those three movies, favorite MCU movies of all time. Amazing. We got some more Marvel content coming up in the future, you guys. I think Secret Invasion is supposed to be out pretty soon. Loki Season 2, I would assume, is going to be coming out pretty soon. But there's been a lot of delays and a lot of stuff going on at Marvel where it's like, okay, what's still happening? What isn't still happening? It's one of the things that I hate why they announce all that stuff ahead of time, because it's like it gets people excited and then it lets them down when stuff gets delayed or canceled. It's like, unless you know for certain that you're gonna have the content done by this time, then don't fucking announce it like 3-4 years ahead of time. You know what I'm saying? All right, you guys, that's gonna wrap us up for today. Make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this video with others to help support the channel, and I'll see you guys next time.